Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm bringing you two stories centered around one theme: new houses. The first story was sent to me by an anonymous viewer through the email in the description, and the second one is different. I worked directly with the person who experienced it. So today is going to be something special. Let's begin. After taking a gap year after college, I decided it was finally time to settle down somewhere. I had spent almost a year doing whatever I wanted, traveling a little, working random jobs, staying with friends longer than I should have. It was fun at first, but after a while it started to feel like I didn't really belong anywhere. So I started looking for a place where I could stay for a while. Nothing permanent, just somewhere quiet where I could live alone and figure out what I wanted to do next. That's how I ended up renting a small house in Ohio. It wasn't a place I had planned to move to. Honestly, I picked it because the rent was cheap, the neighborhood looked quiet, and the landlord didn't ask too many questions. The house itself was older, probably built sometime in the 80s, but it didn't look bad. One floor, a small front yard, a narrow driveway, and a wooden staircase inside that led to a half-finished second floor that the listing called storage space. When I met the real estate agent to get the keys, he walked me through the house once, just to show me where everything was. Kitchen, living room, bathroom, bedroom, normal stuff. Then we got to the end of the hallway, where there was a small door next to the stairs. He stopped there for a second before saying anything. "That one stays locked?" he said. I looked at the door. It was smaller than the others, with an old metal handle and a keyhole that looked worn out. "What's in there?" I asked. "Just storage," he said. "Old stuff from the previous owner. Nothing important." He didn't look at me when he said it. "Can I use it?" I asked. He shook his head. "I wouldn't. There's nothing useful in there, and the owner asked to keep it closed." That felt a little weird, but not weird enough to argue about. People leave junk behind all the time. I just nodded. "All right." Before he left, he handed me the keys and said one more thing. "If you hear noises at night, don't worry about it." I thought he was joking. "What kind of noises?" He smiled, but it didn't really look like a joke. "Old houses make sounds. Pipes, wood, stairs, you know?" I laughed a little. "Yeah, I guess." He didn't say anything else after that. Just got in his car and left. That was my first night in the house. I didn't even have all my furniture yet. Just a mattress on the floor, a chair, and a couple boxes in the living room. The place felt bigger when it was empty. Too quiet. Every sound echoed more than it should have. Around midnight, I turned the lights off and went to sleep. I remember thinking the silence felt strange. Not scary, just unfamiliar. I don't know how long I had been asleep when I heard the first noise. A small metallic sound, like something hitting the floor. It was quick, almost like a coin dropping on wood. I opened my eyes but didn't move. For a few seconds I just listened. Nothing, no footsteps, no voices, no doors, just the house again. Quiet. I told myself it was probably something falling in the kitchen, or maybe I left a window open. Old houses make sounds. That's what the agent said. So I closed my eyes again and tried to go back to sleep. A few minutes later, I heard something else. This time it wasn't a drop. It sounded like weight on the stairs. One step, then another, slow, like someone walking carefully so the wood wouldn't creak too loud. My eyes opened again, and this time I didn't even try to move. I just listened. The sound stopped halfway up the staircase. No more steps, no doors, no voices, nothing. I stayed awake for a long time after that, staring at the ceiling, telling myself the same thing over and over. It's just the house, just the pipes, just the wood settling. But sometime before I fell asleep again, I remembered something I hadn't thought about since the afternoon. The locked door at the end of the hallway. And the way the agent said, "That one stays closed." I don't remember exactly when I fell asleep. I was lying on the bed, still thinking about everything that had happened in the last few days. The move, the house, the locked room, the strange feeling I couldn't explain. At some point, my eyes just closed, and the next thing I knew, I was standing in the hallway. Not waking up, not getting out of bed, just standing there. The lights were off, but I could still see the shape of the walls, the stairs, the door at the end of the hall. the locked door. For a moment, I didn't even question why I was there. It felt normal, like I had walked out of my room without remembering it. The house was completely silent, not the normal kind of quiet, the kind of quiet that feels thick, like the air isn't moving at all. I could hear my own breathing, slow, too loud. I looked toward the end of the hallway. The door was still closed, the same door the agent told me not to open. I stood there for a few seconds, just staring at it. Then I heard something, a faint sound from the other side, so soft I wasn't even sure it was real, like fingers lightly touching the wood. I felt my stomach tighten, but I couldn't move. My feet stayed where they were. Another sound, closer this time, a slow scrape, like something sliding across the floor inside the room. I remember thinking, the door is locked, there's nothing in there. But my body didn't listen. I took one step forward. The floor creaked under my foot, the sound echoing in the hallway louder than it should have. Then the handle moved, just a little, a small metallic click. I froze. The handle turned again, slowly, like someone on the other side was trying not to make noise. The door opened a crack. A thin line of darkness appeared. No light inside, nothing at all, just black. The air around me felt colder, not cold like the window was open, cold like I had stepped into a basement. I didn't want to get closer. But I did. One step, then another. The door kept opening, just a little more each time, enough to make it feel like something inside was watching me, waiting for me to come closer. I stopped right in front of the doorway. I could feel my heart beating in my throat. I slowly raised my hand, like I was about to push the door open the rest of the way. And right when I leaned forward to look inside, the door slammed shut, hard. So hard the sound exploded through the hallway, like someone from inside had thrown their full weight against it. I jumped back, and my eyes opened at the same time. I was in my bed, in the dark, my heart pounding so fast it hurt. For a few seconds, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what just happened. Just a dream. That's all it was. Just a dream. Then I heard something. From outside my room, a small metallic sound, like something hitting the floor. A single sharp noise, exactly like a coin dropping on wood. A small metallic noise, like something hitting the floor. For a second, I didn't move. I just lay there, staring into the dark, trying to convince myself I imagined it. Then I heard it again, a faint roll, like something small moving across the wood floor and stopping. My chest felt tight, like my body already knew I shouldn't get up. I thought about going to check. I really did, but the image from the dream was still stuck in my head. The door, the handle moving, the way it slammed shut. I pulled the blanket up a little and turned my head toward the wall, trying not to look at the doorway. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. Every small sound felt louder than it should. The refrigerator in the kitchen, the wind outside, the wood settling somewhere in the house. I kept telling myself the same thing. It's just an old house. You just moved in. You're tired. That's all. I stayed like that for a long time. I don't think I slept again. I just waited until I could see a little bit of light coming through the window. When morning finally came, the house felt normal again. No sounds. No cold feeling. No door at the end of the hallway. Just a house. Still, I didn't check the hallway. I grabbed my keys, went outside, and decided I needed to get out for a while. I told myself I just needed groceries. Something normal to do. Something that didn't involve being inside that house. The town was small, so the nearest store wasn't far. On the way back from the store, I saw an old man standing near the mailbox across the street from my house. He looked like he had been there for a while, slowly sorting through a stack of letters, holding them close to his face like his eyes weren't as good as they used to be. I hesitated, then walked over. I figured it might help to know at least one person in this neighborhood. "Hi," I said. "I just moved into the house over there." He didn't answer right away. He lifted his head slowly, like the voice surprised him. His eyes stopped on me for a second, then moved past me, toward the house behind me. He squinted, pushed his glasses up with one finger, and kept staring. "That house?" he asked quietly. "Yeah." He kept looking at it a few seconds longer before speaking again. "Haven't seen anyone in there for a long time." There was something in the way he said it that made my chest feel tight. Not surprised. Not curious. Just uncomfortable. Marky renting it again? He asked. I frowned. Marky? The owner, the old man said. We used to be neighbors, long time ago. He finally looked back at me. You renting from him? Through an agent, I said. I never met the owner. He nodded slowly, like that made sense. For a moment, neither of us talked. The wind moved through the trees behind the houses, and the sound felt louder than it should have. I don't know why I asked the next question. Maybe because of the night before. Maybe because of the locked door. Do you know why he left? The old man didn't answer. He just looked at me. Really looked this time, like he was deciding if I should know. You staying there alone? He asked. Yeah. Another pause. His eyes went back to the house again. That place used to be loud, he said. I felt a chill run down my arms. Loud? Kid lived there, he said. Could hear him outside all the time, running around, yelling, normal stuff. He shifted the letters in his hand. Then one day, nothing. I swallowed. What happened? He didn't answer right away. He took his glasses off, wiped them slowly on his shirt, then put them back on. That was about 20 years ago, he said. It was Marky, his wife, and their boy. His voice got quieter. The kid died in that house. My stomach dropped. How? The old man looked at me like he didn't want to say it, but the words came out anyway. Choked. I felt my throat tighten without meaning to. On what? He shook his head once, slow. Coin. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Coin? He nodded. Swallowed it while he was playing. Got stuck. They couldn't get it out. The street felt colder all of a sudden. I could hear the sound from last night in my head. That metal noise, that small roll on the floor. I forced myself to speak. What happened after that? The old man looked down at the ground. His mother lost her mind, he said. Wouldn't sleep, wouldn't leave the boy's room, said she could still hear him in the house. He looked back up at me. Marky tried to stay, didn't work. He nodded toward my place. Too much history in that house. Did anyone live there after? He let out a dry laugh. Not for long. My heart started beating faster. What do you mean? He looked at me again, the same way he did before, like he was checking if I really wanted the answer. He tried renting it, the old man said. A few times. And? Silence. Then he said it. Last people stayed 4 days. I felt the back of my neck go cold. Why did they leave? The old man didn't answer right away. His eyes moved slowly from me to the house, then back to me. You hear anything yet? He asked. My chest tightened. What? At night, he said. Any sounds? For a second, I didn't know what to say. The coin, the hallway, the dream, the door. Just the house settling, I said. He stared at me a little longer, then nodded once, like he expected that answer. Yeah, he said quietly. That's what they said too. Neither of us talked after that. I forced a small smile, said thanks, and walked back to the house as fast as I could without running. The whole way there, I could hear the same sound in my head. A small metallic hit, something rolling on the floor, like a coin. Right now, it's the night of my second day in this house. I'm sitting in my room with my laptop open, trying to decide if I'm overreacting or if something is actually wrong here. That's why I'm writing this. I don't really know who else to tell. Ever since I talked to the old man this afternoon, I haven't been able to stop thinking about what he said. About the kid, about the coin, about the way he asked me if I had heard anything at night. I keep telling myself it's just my head messing with me. I just moved to a new place. I'm alone. The house is old. Of course, it's going to make noises. But last night didn't feel like normal noises. And that dream didn't feel normal either. I can still see that door in my head. The locked one at the end of the hallway. The one the agent told me not to open. I keep wondering about it now. He said it was just storage, just old stuff from the previous owner. But after what the neighbor told me, I can't stop thinking about something. What if that room isn't just storage? What if that was the boys' room? I don't even know why that thought won't leave my head. And the coin. That sound I heard last night. That small metallic hit on the floor. That rolling noise in the hallway. I didn't want to think about it before. Now I can't think about anything else. Part of me feels stupid even writing this. It sounds like something out of a horror story. Another part of me feels like I should get out of here before something worse happens. The problem is, I already paid 6 months in advance. If I leave now, I lose all of it. And I don't even know if I have a real reason to leave. Nothing has actually happened. Not really. Just sounds. Just a dream. Just a story from an old neighbor. So I don't know what to do. That's why I'm sending this. Do you think I should stay here? Or should I leave now and forget about the money? Before I find out what's really inside that locked room. Daniel's family moved to New Mexico at the beginning of fall, when the air started to feel drier and the wind carried dust across the empty roads outside the small town where he had just accepted a new job. The company was about a 30-minute drive from the house they had rented, far enough to make the mornings a little rushed, but close enough that he didn't have to move into the city. It was the best place they could find in a short amount of time. The family had 3 people: Daniel, his wife Laura, and their 5-year-old daughter, Emily. Laura was pregnant with their second child, a boy, and she had already started her maternity leave. Because she would be spending most of her time at home, she cared more about the house than Daniel did. She wanted something quiet, comfortable, and safe enough for a child, but not too isolated. The house they rented was in an older neighborhood near the edge of town. It wasn't abandoned and it wasn't broken down, but it had a strange, old feeling to it the moment they stepped inside. The paint on the walls was still in good condition, the floors were clean, and the windows let in enough light. Yet everything about the place felt like it had been there for a very long time. Older than the other houses nearby. The front door opened directly into a wide living room with wooden floors that looked slightly worn, but still solid. The furniture inside had mostly been removed, except for a few things the owner had left behind. A long wooden table near the wall, an old standing lamp in the corner, and a small cabinet with glass doors that held nothing but dust. Laura walked slowly across the room, looking around while holding one hand under her stomach. "It's not bad," she said quietly. "Feels old, but not bad." Daniel nodded, setting one of the boxes down near the couch. "It's better than the last place." Emily ran past them without saying anything, already curious about the rest of the house. Her small footsteps echoed lightly across the floor as she disappeared into the hallway. The hallway led to 3 rooms and a small bathroom. One of the rooms would be theirs, one for Emily, and the last one was empty, just in case they needed space later when the baby was born. The bedroom they chose was simple, with a large window facing the backyard. Outside, an old pine tree stood near the fence, its branches long and uneven, moving slowly whenever the wind passed through. The tree was taller than the house itself, and from the window it felt closer than it really was. Laura looked at it for a moment before turning away. "I don't like that tree," she said. Daniel laughed softly. "It's just a tree." "Still," she replied, "it looks like it's been here longer than the house." They kept unpacking for the rest of the afternoon. Boxes, bags, small pieces of furniture they had brought from the old place. Most of the work was done by Daniel, while Laura cleaned and organized what she could without getting too tired. Emily moved from room to room, talking to herself, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just watching her parents without saying anything. The last room they checked was the living room again, when Daniel noticed something sitting on a small table near the wall. It was an old telephone. Not the kind people usually kept anymore. It had a thick base, a long cord, and a receiver that looked heavier than modern ones. The color used to be white, but time had turned it into a dull yellow. The buttons were slightly worn, and the plastic surface had small scratches, as if it had been used for many years. Daniel picked it up and looked at the bottom. "No cable," he said. Laura walked closer. "Does it even work?" "I don't know." He put it back on the table, turning it slightly so it faced the couch. "It looks kind of nice, though." Laura smiled faintly. "It does. Feels like something from an old movie." They stood there for a moment, both looking at the phone without saying anything else. "Leave it," Daniel said finally. "If the owner didn't take it, it's probably not important." Laura nodded. "Yeah, we can leave it." By the time the sun started going down, they were both exhausted. Most of the important things had been unpacked. The beds were ready, and the kitchen had enough supplies for the night. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt lived in, even though they had only been there for a few hours. Laura prepared something simple for dinner while Daniel helped Emily wash her hands in the bathroom sink. The little girl looked tired, but she kept talking about her new room, about the big tree outside, about how the house smelled different from the old one. After they ate, Daniel carried the last box into the bedroom and dropped it near the wall. "That's enough for today," he said. Laura agreed. Her back hurt, her legs felt heavy, and she just wanted to lie down. Emily was already half asleep when Laura took her to her room. The small bed was placed near the wall, with a night lamp on the table beside it. The light made the room feel warmer than the rest of the house. Laura sat on the edge of the bed and brushed the girl's hair away from her face. "You like it here?" she asked softly. Emily nodded, eyes already closing. "Yeah. It's big." Laura smiled and kissed her forehead. "Good. Try to sleep, okay?" Emily whispered something that Laura couldn't hear clearly, then turned to the side and pulled the blanket up. Laura stayed there a few seconds longer before standing up and turning off the lamp. When she walked back to the living room, the house felt quieter than before. Daniel was already lying on the couch, looking at his phone, barely awake. "You coming?" he asked. "In a minute." Laura looked around the room one more time before turning off the last light. For a moment, her eyes stopped on the old telephone on the table. It was exactly where they had left it. Silent. Still. She stared at it a little longer than she meant to, then shook her head and walked to the bedroom. They went to sleep not long after that. It had been a long day, and Daniel fell asleep almost as soon as his head touched the pillow. Laura lay on her side, one hand resting on her stomach, listening to the wind moving outside the house. The branches of the tall pine trees scraped softly against each other in the dark. The sound came and went with the wind, slow and uneven. She closed her eyes, trying to relax. The house felt different at night, colder, quieter, too quiet. She opened her eyes again, staring into the darkness of the room, not sure why she suddenly felt so awake. Daniel was already breathing slowly beside her. Emily's room was down the hallway. Everything should have felt normal, but it didn't. Laura pulled the blanket closer, trying to ignore the strange feeling in her chest. Then, somewhere in the house, a phone began to ring. Laura's eyes opened immediately. For a moment, she didn't move. She wasn't even sure what had woken her up. The room was dark, the only light coming faintly from the window, just enough to see the shape of the furniture. Then she heard it again, the ringing. It wasn't loud, but in the silence of the house, it felt too clear to ignore. She stayed still, listening. Daniel was asleep beside her, breathing slowly, completely unaware. Laura frowned, trying to understand where the sound was coming from. It wasn't her phone. It wasn't Daniel's either. Both of them were on the small table next to the bed, and neither screen was lighting up. The ringing continued. Her chest tightened a little as she realized there was only one thing in the house that could make that sound: the old telephone in the living room. She swallowed, telling herself it didn't make sense. The phone wasn't connected to anything. Daniel had even checked the bottom earlier. There was no cable, no line, nothing plugged into the wall. The ringing didn't stop. It kept going, steady, patient, like someone on the other end had no intention of hanging up. Laura pushed the blanket away slowly and sat up, her hand resting on her stomach without thinking. The air in the room felt colder than before. She waited a few seconds, hoping the sound would stop on its own. It didn't. She turned toward Daniel and touched his shoulder. "Daniel?" He didn't move. She shook him a little harder. "Daniel, wake up." He let out a tired breath, barely opening his eyes. "What? Do you hear that?" He stayed still for a second, listening, but at that exact moment the ringing stopped. The silence felt heavier than before. Daniel frowned, half awake. "Hear what?" "The phone," Laura said quietly. "The phone in the living room. It was ringing." Daniel blinked a few times, then rubbed his face. "You were dreaming." "I wasn't," she said. "It kept ringing, for a while." He turned his head toward the door, listening, but the house was completely silent now. Even the wind outside seemed to have calmed down. "There's no line connected," he muttered. "It can't ring." Laura didn't answer. She knew what she heard. Daniel sighed and pulled the blanket closer. "You're tired. We both are. First night in a new place, that's all. He reached over and touched her arm gently. Try to sleep, okay? She hesitated, then nodded. Daniel turned to the side again, and within seconds, his breathing slowed like before. Laura stayed sitting for a moment longer. Her heart was beating faster than it should. She lay back down slowly, staring into the dark, listening for the sound again. Nothing happened. The house stayed quiet. Too quiet. After a long time, her eyes finally closed. When morning came, everything felt normal again. Sunlight filled the kitchen. The air felt warmer, and the strange feeling from the night before seemed distant, almost unreal. Daniel got ready for work while Laura prepared breakfast. Emily sat at the table swinging her legs, talking about something she had seen outside the window, pointing toward the backyard where the tall pine tree stood behind the fence. They ate together like any other day. Daniel checked the time, grabbed his keys, and kissed Laura on the cheek before leaving. Call me if you need anything, he said. I will. Emily ran to the door and hugged his leg before he stepped outside. The sound of the car faded slowly as he drove away. For the rest of the morning, the house felt peaceful. Laura cleaned the kitchen, then went to the living room to finish organizing the boxes they hadn't opened the day before. Her eyes stopped on the telephone. It was still on the small table near the wall, exactly where they had left it. In the daylight, it didn't look strange anymore, just old. She walked closer and picked it up, turning it in her hands. No cable, no connection, nothing. She stared at it for a few seconds, then let out a quiet breath. This thing is useless, she murmured to herself. Emily was sitting on the floor with her toys, not paying attention. Laura carried the phone to the storage room near the back of the house and placed it on a shelf between two boxes. She stayed there a moment, as if making sure she really wanted to leave it there. Then she closed the door and went back to the living room. The rest of the day passed without anything unusual. She and Emily watched TV, ate lunch, and spent some time outside in the yard. The wind moved through the branches of the tall pine tree again, making the leaves shift slowly. But in the sunlight, it didn't feel as unsettling as it had during the night. By the time Daniel came home, the sky was already getting darker. He opened the front door, stepped inside, and immediately stopped. He was holding something in his hand. Laura frowned when she saw it. The telephone. Why did you put this in the storage room? He asked. She froze for a second. You found it? Yeah, it was on the shelf in there. He walked into the living room and placed it back on the small table in the exact same spot where it had been before. I like it, he said casually. It fits the house. Laura looked at the phone, then at him. It rang last night. Daniel sighed. You told me. I'm serious. He shrugged. It's an old house. Stuff makes noise. It wasn't noise, she said quietly. Daniel didn't argue. He just shook his head a little and took off his jacket. Let's not start this again. We barely slept. He smiled faintly, trying to lighten the mood. Leave it there, okay? Don't throw it away. Laura hesitated, then nodded. Okay. That night they went to bed earlier. Daniel fell asleep quickly again, just like the night before. Laura lay awake. She didn't know why, but she felt the same cold restlessness crawling under her skin. The wind outside grew stronger, pushing against the branches of the tree. The house creaked softly in the dark. She closed her eyes, trying to ignore it. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Then the ringing started again. Her eyes opened instantly. She didn't move at first. She just listened. The sound was coming from the living room. There was no doubt this time. Her hand tightened around the blanket. She looked at Daniel, still asleep. The ringing continued, steady, unnatural, like it didn't belong in the silence of the house. Laura sat up slowly. Her legs felt weak before she even stood. She stepped out of bed and walked toward the door, her heartbeat loud in her ears. The hallway was dark. The living room was darker. But the sound was clear. She walked closer to the table. The phone was there, ringing. No cable, no line, nothing connected to it. Her hand trembled as she reached for the receiver. For a second, she almost pulled her hand back. Then she picked it up. She didn't say anything. For a moment, there was only silence on the other end. Then a voice spoke, an old woman's voice, slow, dry, cold. I'll leave my house. Laura felt the strength leave her legs. She dropped the receiver and ran. She didn't even remember turning around. She just ran back to the bedroom as fast as she could and stopped in the doorway. Emily was standing next to the bed, not crying, not screaming, just standing there looking at her. "Mama?" Laura's voice shook. "What are you doing up?" Emily stepped closer, her face pale. "There's a lady," she whispered. "She wanted me to go with her." Laura felt her stomach twist. "What lady?" Emily lifted one leg slightly. "She got mad when I said no, and she pinched me." Laura grabbed her gently and pulled the blanket aside. Daniel moved in his sleep, starting to wake up. Laura looked at the child's leg. There was a dark mark on the skin, like fingers had pressed too hard. Daniel sat up, confused. "What's going on?" Laura tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't come out right. "The phone, Emily, there was." Before she could finish, the ringing started again. This time, Daniel heard it too. He looked toward the hallway, then at Laura. "Stay here," he said, and he stood up. Daniel walked out of the bedroom without saying anything else. Laura stayed where she was, holding Emily close to her, her eyes fixed on the dark hallway. The ringing continued, steady and unnatural, filling the silence of the house in a way that made it feel smaller than before. She could hear Daniel's footsteps moving across the living room floor. Then the sound stopped. For a moment, there was nothing. No voice, no movement, no ringing. Laura held her breath without realizing it. A few seconds later, she heard the faint sound of the receiver being placed back down. Daniel's footsteps came back toward the hallway, faster this time. He appeared in the doorway almost immediately, and the moment Laura saw his face, she knew something was wrong. He wasn't confused. He wasn't annoyed. He looked pale. His eyes moved quickly from Laura to Emily, then back toward the hallway, like he didn't want to stand there any longer than he had to. "Get up," he said, his voice low but tense. "Pack a bag, just the important things." Laura stared at him, not understanding. "What?" "We're leaving." His tone was different now, sharper. "Now, Laura, please." She felt her chest tighten. "What did you hear?" Daniel shook his head. "Just pack the bag." "That's not an answer." He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. "I'm serious. We're not staying here tonight." Laura had never seen him like that before. Not angry, not scared in a normal way. It looked like he had already made the decision before he even came back into the room. Emily held onto Laura's arm, her small fingers cold. "Mama, are we going somewhere?" Laura looked at Daniel again. He nodded once. "Yes," he said quietly. "We're going somewhere else." Laura didn't ask anything else after that. She stood up slowly, still holding Emily, and walked to the closet. Her hands felt clumsy as she pulled out a small suitcase and opened it on the bed. Daniel went to the other side of the room and grabbed a few things without even looking at them. Clothes, wallet, keys, phone charger. Nothing else. No one talked while they packed. The house felt too quiet again, like it was waiting. Laura kept expecting the phone to start ringing one more time. It didn't. When the bag was closed, Daniel picked it up immediately. "Let's go." They walked down the hallway together. Laura tried not to look toward the living room, but she couldn't stop herself. The telephone was still on the table, exactly where it had been. The receiver was back in place. For a second, she thought she saw the cord move slightly, like it had just been touched, but when she looked again, it was completely still. She turned away quickly and followed Daniel to the door. The night air felt colder than before when they stepped outside. Daniel locked the door without saying anything, his hands moving faster than usual. Emily stayed close to Laura, holding her hand the whole time. As they walked to the car, Laura felt a strange pressure in the back of her neck, the same feeling she sometimes had when she thought someone was watching her. She stopped for a second and looked back at the house. All the windows were dark. Nothing moved, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing inside, somewhere behind the glass, looking out at them. "Daniel," she whispered. He didn't turn around. "Get in the car." She opened the back door and helped Emily inside, then got in the passenger seat. Daniel started the engine immediately. The headlights lit up the front of the house for a moment, the pale walls and the tall pine tree beside it casting long shadows across the yard. For a second, Laura thought she saw something near the window, a shape that didn't belong there. But the car moved, and the light shifted, and whatever she thought she saw disappeared. Neither of them spoke while they drove. The road out of the neighborhood was empty, the streetlights far apart, the darkness between them deeper than usual. Laura kept her hands on her stomach, feeling the baby move slightly, as if even the child could sense her tension. After a while, she couldn't stay silent anymore. "What did the voice say?" she asked quietly. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "Nothing." "Daniel," he swallowed, but didn't look at her. "It's nothing." "That's not true." He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. For a long time, he didn't answer. Then he shook his head once. "I don't want to talk about it right now." Laura stared at him, waiting, but he didn't say anything else. They drove into town and stopped at a small motel near the highway, the kind of place with a flickering sign and a parking lot that was almost empty. Daniel got a room without asking any questions. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old carpet and cleaning spray, but it felt warmer than the house they had just left. Emily fell asleep almost immediately on the bed, still holding the blanket Laura had brought with her. Laura sat on the edge of the other bed, watching Daniel as he paced once across the room, then stopped near the window. "You're not going to tell me, are you?" she said. He stayed silent for a few seconds. Then he spoke without turning around. "There was a woman." Laura felt her breath catch. "What?" He looked down at the floor. "Same voice you heard." Her hands tightened. "What did she say?" Daniel closed his eyes for a moment before answering. "She didn't tell us to leave." Laura felt the room go cold. "Then what did she say?" He finally looked at her. His face looked tired, but there was something else in his eyes now. Something she hadn't seen before. "She asked why we came back." Laura stared at him, not understanding. "Back? From where?" Daniel didn't answer. He just shook his head slowly and sat down on the chair near the door. They didn't talk anymore after that. That night, none of them slept well. The next morning, Daniel checked out of the motel as early as possible. They started looking for another place the same day. Neither of them mentioned the house again, and Daniel never told her anything else about the phone call.